If you have chronic pain or symptoms, it's normal to actually want to heal, to get better, to eliminate and overcome those symptoms. The problem is that wanting to heal on its own is not enough. It's actually the expectations that you bring into your day-to-day life that will make a huge difference. In fact, one of the mistakes that I see so often among clients and people that I encounter with chronic pain is that they want to heal so badly, but their expectations are holding them back. This is what I'm going to be discussing in the rest of this video, so hang on in there and we'll get into it. As you probably know, if you've been following my videos or if you've been learning about neuroplastic pain or symptoms, most chronic symptoms are caused by internal distress, negative emotions, chronic fight or flight, chronic stress, which creates all sorts of changes in the body that send the body out of balance and that create more inflammation, more sensitivity to pain, and so on and so forth. Obviously, these symptoms are very unpleasant and we cannot help wanting to heal. In fact, we have to want to heal, right? Ideally, we don't want to settle to just managing the pain, to just accepting the pain. So there's nothing wrong about wanting to heal. However, what people get wrong is that the way they go about the process of healing. Some people want to heal so much that they create a lot of frustration, resistance, and desperation in the process that actually interferes with the healing. Because of course, if the symptoms are being caused by, let's say, internal distress, let me just use the word stress to simplify here, the symptoms are caused by stress, then you're only creating more stress by wanting to heal desperately. And I discussed this topic in more detail in my previous video called the healing paradox. So I'd really encourage you to look at this video after you hear me out on this one, because both of these videos are extremely crucial. They address elements that a lot of people miss out on their healing journey. So most of the time, to get back to the topic of wanting versus expecting, most of the time, it's not the kind of tools that we use that make the biggest difference. Of course, we have to make some changes. If you have neuroplastic pain, then obviously it makes sense that we have to work with our emotions, that we have to do some mind-body work. But a lot of people get concerned that they might not be doing the right things and they might not have the right tools and so on and so forth. But usually what I see and the people I speak to and my clients, what holds people back is not the kind of things they're doing or not doing, it's the kind of outcomes that they're expecting. So I see people with the best of intentions. They want to be healthy, they want to be successful. And yeah, the intention is good. But unfortunately, and it really saddens me to think about this subject, unfortunately, good intentions don't make a whole lot of a difference when it comes to healing, even when it comes to success in other areas of life. It's not the intention, it's not the wanting that matters, it's the expectation, especially so in healing chronic symptoms. So I see a lot of people wanting to heal, but every day they're expecting to see symptoms. They're expecting the movements to hurt. They're expecting that if they go out to that meeting, if they go to that trip, if they travel, it's gonna hurt. They don't want it to hurt, but this is what they're expecting every time that they think of doing something that they're not doing anymore or doing an activity that typically causes pain or symptoms. They're just expecting the symptoms to be there. So the negative expectations are constantly there, interfering with the healing, because when we expect something, we send a signal to our brain. And when we're in that situation, it makes it more likely for us to experience that very symptom that we expect, because the brain will look out for it and the brain will associate that activity with danger, with the possibility of having symptoms. And of course, it's not your fault that you have all of these negative expectations. So don't beat yourself up about it. The problem is that as human beings, we are wired for survival. So we are wired to think negatively sometimes, because sometimes thinking negatively does help us stay alive. So let's say if we used to be out in the forest and we heard a sound, right, a suspicious sound, it usually used to help to think negatively. Because if that sound meant that there's a wolf there or a bear that's gonna eat us, well, then thinking negatively and actually doing something to avoid that bear, right, that helped us stay alive. So this is why we as human beings tend to have a lot of negative expectations, because in the past, generation after generation, especially our ancestors who used to live out in the wild, we had to have this preventative expectation. We had to know how to sense danger, and we had to act on it. The problem with mind-body healing is that we often sense danger where there is none. So when, let's say, we have chronic pain, and chronic pain is actually being caused by certain stressful situations in our lives, we incorrectly think that there is danger in the body. We incorrectly believe that our body is broken, it's damaged, it's weak, when it's not the case. So that expectation is there, but it's not true. You are compelled to believe that it might be true because you think that by doing so, you're going to protect yourself. You think that by maybe avoiding that run or that activity or whatever, you're going to be avoiding symptoms. And it might work in the short term because, of course, if you're not maybe using that part of the body that hurts, maybe it's going to hurt less. But the problem is that the next time you're going to try to engage in something similar, then it's going to hurt because this is the dominant expectation that you have. So I feel that one of the most powerful tools in mind-body healing is to actually work with changing these expectations. And it actually starts by recognizing the fact that you have them. Because a lot of people I talk to, they take it as a given. They just tell me, oh yeah, but if I go out in the garden, then I'm going to get a migraine. Or if I travel, then I'm going to get pain. And the way they say it, it's like it's so definite, it's so true in their heads. Because in the past, this is what happened. So of course, I don't blame them. In the past, this is what happened. But because of what happened in the past, they expect the same outcome, their same result in the future. And because of that, of course, their brain is being trained to experience pain in these circumstances. Because our expectations are everything. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you expect to be in pain after activity because you fear that your body is broken or it cannot handle that activity, then I can almost guarantee you're going to be in pain after that activity. It works like that. So as I was saying, the first step is always to recognize that you are expecting something negative, right? Because if you're in chronic pain, chances are that you are doing this all the time. So no wonder you're not getting better if you're expecting pain all the time, if you're almost looking out for it from the moment that you get out of bed in the morning. If you're constantly monitoring how it feels hour after hour, if you're constantly telling yourself that it might be getting worse or telling yourself that it's going to get worse by the end of the day, right? If you're constantly doing all sorts of things to prevent it getting worse, then actually the dominant expectation there is that it could get worse. And we have to change this because the expectation of a healthy person is that normal activity will not hurt. The expectation of a healthy person is that, yes, some exercise might involve physical exertion. Yes, some days might be stressful and exhausting, but these things will not cause the intense symptoms that people with chronic pain experience. So I know this might sound a little bit woo-woo here, but in order to break free of pain or symptoms, we almost have to think like a person who is already free of chronic pain or symptoms. And that has a lot to do with what we expect. We have to expect a different outcome. And even if in the beginning there are symptoms, we have to know that these symptoms are a result of past conditioning, a result of the brain having been trained to expect pain or symptoms, of the brain being fearful somehow. Very often, when we get pain during or after a certain activity, it's because we have approached that activity with a sense of dread, with a sense of fear, trepidation, and, you guessed it, negative expectation. Even if you don't vocalize that expectation, just notice the way that you've been moving. Notice the way that you've approached the activity. Notice your thoughts, your fear. These kind of behaviors are actually setting a negative expectation, are setting the stage for a negative outcome. So let me just give an example on how to go about changing this. Let's say that you have lower back pain and that every time you stand up or every time you bend down, you're feeling this pain, and of course you're frustrated, and you tell me, but hey, Miriam, every time I stand up, I feel it. Every time I bend down to pick something. So, how can I expect anything differently? So I would tell you, okay, so think about a friend or a relative who does not have this issue at all, right? How would this relative stand up from that chair that you're on? How would he sit down on the sofa? How would he go about his day-to-day life? And I'm not telling you to kind of go to the gym and do the same kind of exercise as this relative of yours. I'm just telling you to observe this relative's attitude and movements. So very often you will notice that there's a great difference between the way you're approaching things and the way that this person is approaching things. This person is standing up, sitting down without a second thought. He has zero expectation of pain. You are standing up, sitting down with trepidation, probably tension, and looking out for the pain. Sometimes unconsciously. So this requires training, guys. You can't just expect to, have a positive affirmation, say, okay, now I'm going to stand up and it's not going to hurt, and then it doesn't hurt. It might happen, but, in most cases, it requires repetition. It requires constantly negating your negative expectations, telling yourself that it doesn't have to be this way. It involves first mimicking these natural movements that you've noticed in your friends and your relatives, trying to move more naturally, because that helps set a different expectation as well. Because through the way that we behave, through the way that we use our body, we can either increase our trust in the body or decrease it. So starting with, the way that you approach things, the way that you think about these outcomes, the way that you think about your future activities. How can you change your expectations? Let's say you're going to travel in a few weeks' time and you're already thinking oh, it's going to hurt so much on the plane. Maybe I should take painkillers. Maybe I shouldn't go. Already there's so many negative expectations there. What you would need to do is, as soon as you're having these thoughts, you're like, hey, stop. It doesn't have to be this way, right? Sitting down on a plane is harmless. If anything, it's just a little bit uncomfortable. It doesn't have to be this way. And in the past, I used to travel on a plane and it didn't used to hurt. Plus, if there is any pain, it's just a conditioned response. It's just my stress and I can handle it. But I can expect better. I know that I can expect better. Now here I'm just saying things that have come to my mind that I would tell myself. I wouldn't go to great lengths and keep repeating all this, because if you keep repeating affirmations, then it can get a little bit too much. It can get a little bit too desperate. And we don't want to want something too much, right? Because wanting something too much is actually resisting the outcome. What we want is to change and negate negative expectations. So you got a negative expectation about getting on a plane and it being painful. You're like, hey, no, doesn't have to be that way. Maybe then you visualize yourself getting on the plane, sitting down normally, standing up normally. How would it feel if you could get on that plane and feel at ease? How would you move? Maybe just spending a few seconds visualizing yourself, because this helps change your expectations, but that is it. Then, if you find yourself having that negative expectation again the next day, you do the same thing. You negate, oh, it doesn't have to be that way. Imagine yourself getting on the plane without any problems, getting off the plane without any problems, and that's it. Think like a person who is already free of pain or symptoms. How would he approach life? How would you be going about your life, about your activities, if you didn't have these pain or symptoms? Then start small, from the easiest thing that you're doing, from the day-to-day stuff, from the way that you're standing up, sitting down, picking an object. Start from that stuff and try to do them from this attitude and way of thinking of a pain-free person. By the way, this is something that I usually share just in my coaching sessions, but I see so many people getting confused lately on what they're doing wrong that I thought I'd address it over here in this video. Right? Because your expectations are everything. And I promise, with repetition, with the constant negation of negative expectations, with the constant adoption of more natural behaviors, more healthier ways of thinking, your pain will eventually go away, because you will break that cycle of conditioning that is being fueled by your fear and negative expectations. So, I hope that I've given you something to think about today. Keep in mind, it's not about wanting to be pain-free, it's about expecting to be pain-free or symptom-free. And with that said, I wish you all the best, and I'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.